Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue à la 5e conférence de la série de leçons du mardi. Aujourd'hui, nous avons le plaisir et l'honneur d'accueillir Aristide Antonas. Merci beaucoup, Aristide, d'avoir accepté de partager avec nous et de parler de tous les projets que tu as développés, des projets à la fois pratiques et théoriques dont tu nous parleras. Donc, actuellement professeur à l'Académie des Beaux-Arts de Vienne, Antonas est architecte, docteur en philosophie et artiste. Il a enseigné dans plusieurs écoles, de la Bartlett à l'EIA, à l'ETH de Zurich. Et aujourd'hui, il nous propose une conférence du titre « The Script, the Manual and the Protocol ». Et il nous propose sa conférence dans le contexte des leçons du mardi intitulée « Multitude de pièces ». Un cycle qui vise à discuter les concepts et le rôle de la pièce au sein de l'habitat, à la suite des développements des phénomènes sociaux et environnementaux dans les contextes européens et occidentaux, ainsi que dans d'autres traditions mondiales. Antonas a publié des romans, des nouvelles, des scénarios de théâtre et des essais. Et les principaux thèmes abordés dans ces essais sont l'architecture considérée comme une série de processus qu'il définit comme des protocoles urbains. Encore un autre thème qu'il a développé dans ses essais est l'infrastructure de la sphère domestique et la stabilité face au flux exagéré des données. Grâce à l'utilisation de différents médias, des textes, à la photographie, aux vidéos, à la simulation numérique. Et grâce à l'utilisation des différentes sources et des différentes méthodologies, du processus archéologique aux références juridiques, Antonas a conçu des lieux imaginaires dans l'espace urbain, des lieux qui répondent aux défis sociaux environnementaux de notre époque et des lieux qui sont conçus à travers des approches communautaires. Certains de ces projets ont été réalisés, d'autres ont pris la forme des maquettes ou des collages ou des installations qui ont été exposées dans plusieurs grandes expositions internationales, à Documenta, à la Biennale d'Istanbul, à la Biennale de Venise, à la Biennale de Sao Paulo, à Display Prague, au New Museum à New York, juste pour citer quelques lieux qui ont accueilli les œuvres d'Antonas. Antonas qui a aussi organisé des solo exhibitions dans différentes parties du monde. Et les œuvres d'Antonas sont conçues comme l'expression d'une pensée à la croisière de la théorie et de la pratique. Elle veut suggérer des questions à travers les outils du dessin. Elle nous guide vers les rêves des formes de vie alternatives. Elles nous font apprécier à nouveau une architecture aux traits graciles, comme un échafaudage provisoire. Elle suggère les renoncements au plaisir de la forme fascinant. Et elle nous guide à apprécier une architecture qui offre une existence et produit des situations. Dans la recherche d'Antonas de remettre en discussion la consistance de l'architecture, non seulement la pièce devient cruciale, mais la pièce cède la place à l'unité minimale qu'Antonas a identifiée dans les lits qui semblent devenir dans ses œuvres les radeaux fragiles mais confortables de l'existence. Et après tout, comme dans les actes fondamentaux des superstudios, c'est dans les lits qui ont né, qui l'ont fait l'amour, qui l'ont étudié, qui l'ont mangé, et c'est dans les lits qui l'ont meurt. Donc merci beaucoup encore Aristide, on est très heureux de t'avoir avec nous. Je te donne la parole pour ta conférence.
Moi, je crois que vous m'entendez. C'est dommage que je ne vais pas parler en français aujourd'hui.
Il parle très bien en français, donc la conversation finale, on peut la faire en français.
Oui. C'est vrai que mon français a détérioré pendant les dernières années. Alors, je me sens un peu plus capable de faire cette Oui, merci beaucoup. Oui, oui. Alors, on revient dans la langue française quand vous voulez. Mais je commence en anglais. So, I thought I would introduce this piece of thought about a textual understanding of architecture, an understanding of architecture as texts, as a set of linguistic systems. And this title that I put here, the script, the manual, and the protocol, are just to organize a bit this field of textual understanding of architecture. Architecture is an art of notation, we could say, so it has to do also with the material side of writing. But here I will directly drive you to the past of architecture and just introduce this short conference, let's call it, with this building. This building that if you speak a bit of Russian, you can understand that it's these two son that are written, sonata. It means sonata of sleep, so it's a kind of word, it's a game with words. And it is a building, a strange building done by Konstantin Melnikov, and I enter my presentation through this. I think it will make it simpler, because Melnikov was working at this moment it's a competition project, never built, but he was working at this time together with other people in a project that was called Green City, where also other very provocative things are produced in the frame of which, but I insist on this, it's a kind of sleeping, like a dormitory, but it is a dormitory that it's somehow idiosyncratic. We can say people are, the inclination is because the beds needed to have this inclination because he wanted to have the best quality of sleeping for people who were very tired. So it was also, I think, 1928, a period where all the communist power of the new Soviet Union was already a bit exhausted. They deserved better sleep. And also, I think he was also somehow impressed by the work of Ford and the understanding of the American dream of how work is understood. And he was proposing this sleeping dormitory. Because of people getting together, there were scientists at the two sides, so the two, let's say, sacred circles that you see at the two sides are scientists observing people while sleeping in order to really be sure that they sleep well, so they are somehow, and in the middle there are some common baths, and a lot of literature has been written about this building, about maybe being a Stalinist overdose, where people who will sleep all together, mentioning works of literature against totalitarianism, and but this is a very strange place. Melnikov was also suggesting to have something like an techniques of control, pressure, humidity, air. So there was an environment that was totally controlled, but also there was a sound, so the rustle of leaves, cooing of nightingales, the soft murmur of waves, would instantly relax the most. I read you from the classical text about Melnikov. And if nothing of this, if you understand, it is something like an artificial augmentation of sounds of nature that he was proposing, so that it covers all like a kind of idealized sound. And if all this failed, the beds started also gently to rock, so consciousness could be lost. So there is this kind of, there is an article in Cabinet magazine by Tony Wood, and also a big solo monography of Melnikov, where you can find details about all this. And you can also find this, how could we call them? Something like they were suspicious of something very wrong happening there, that maybe Melnikov is going towards a very Stalinistic approach, etc. What we immediately find interesting, if we look a bit at Melnikov's own house, which is this very famous atelier in Moscow, which has this very emblematic facade with hexagonic windows, if you remember, we see that in this space, himself, for his own family, when he's called to design their own room for sleep, their sleeping room, he does exactly the same thing. So he does a room for everybody. There are some elementary obstacles that you see, but there are no separation walls. And also his son, who is an artist, paints this like all golden, telling that that was the original color of the room, and that his father wanted them to feel like flying in a non-spatial situation. So I think that this explains also a bit that this first building is not so easily rejected as something totally suspicious, you know, about that Melnikov had a kind of commission to do something to control a number of people that were working. There are other spaces that are allowed for having personal spaces in the house. So it's not that he excludes the spaces that are personal, but he's insisting that sleep is not something that has to be personal. Sleep is a common, it can happen in a common room in the best way. So I will come back. I will finish with some answer to this building. I think that I try to elaborate. But first I will, I have to also finish, since we were speaking about transformation, that all this happens in a setting of an institute of transformations of humans, change of humans. So in the early Soviet Union, that's what they wanted to do. And yes, I go now to another environment. This is Athens, first of all. It's a city that I know well, and I worked in the past, and I introduced again my some thoughts about texts, because I observed during 2010, 2012, there was the absolute decline, visible decline of Athens. Now there is decline, but it's not so visible. I realized that in the Athenian context, you had streets that were full of people living in the streets, while the buildings of Athens were empty. And I thought that if the streets are full and the buildings inside are empty, there is something wrong that is not exactly in the it's not architecture that can change it. Maybe you need some textual thought, some literature of law, of legislation, that you just have to find ways to bring people in that are out now. And it was strange because nobody was giving these spaces. I did a research to find the spaces where you could unify buildings that were abandoned to create something like landscapes. Going back to a theory of the past, so I was referring to some very exemplary projects. The No Stop City is one of them. There is a strong Italian influence in my work, and of course Archisums Associati and Andrea Branzi, who died recently, were part of all this understanding of an infinite expansion of the city with these very bizarre pictures that I always find very attractive, but he proposed them as something that is horrible, but in an interesting way. I think that one of the most important part of this work is the balance between the propositional side, the image that you have, that I find it always very nice, but also that there is a statement against it. So there is a poison in it that happens because of an exaggeration of the condition we are already in. So he didn't want to invent something. He wanted to show better something that was already there and was hidden in a sense. So I think that this is another idea of this textuality of architecture that I'm interested in. Pier Vittorio and Martino Tatara project about the stop city. So I think they were very influenced by Branzi too, and they tried to work on a stopping situation of this expansion. And Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal, the 530 dwellings transformation. All this, if you remember, were concrete or brick facade parts that were erased, and they did all these openings without changing so much. Again, transforming the existing and very derelict building to something that was really different here. What you cannot see here is that they also changed the plan. They also erased walls in a way that you had. It was a very cheap intervention because it was more destroying than constructing and in creating bigger spaces for people. So it's amazing. So my work was in Athens, and Athens is done as, this is a block, an Athenian block. The Athens, the city plan is a strange one. It has a triangle inside because of they wanted to create a triangle viewing the Acropolis, the Bavarian king. So you always find this, you very often find this kind of strange shape of the blocks. And I did many studies with a kind of erasing totally the non-structural parts, of keeping only elevators, stairs, and columns and beams, and unifying blocks that were all empty. If you don't know that all this is empty, it doesn't make any sense. But if you know that this was an empty block at the 7 levels, 7 layers, you understand that this was something like an open landscape for working in it. So the first work I have done after deciding that it's a bit crazy to have people living outside and apartments being empty, living really outside, I did this sleeping area project, which is practically the same as the Empty University project. So Empty University, it is also called because of this first, commenting this first university that was done by Archisum Associati before the Stop City. Sleeping area was a work that I presented in a Joseph Grima show together with he curated it together with Ethel Barona-Paul and Pelin Tan. It was the Adhocracy shows, and it included a series of plans of destroyed, semi-destroyed blocks that were somehow these like of partitas, like scores of music. That's how I perceived it. And scripts where you had some description of what could happen in them. This happens while I think that there is, you see here is Foucault, I'm sorry it's in English, but it's, what was important for me from 63, literature 64, you see that Foucault was, I think, being a bit against humanism and Sartre. He somehow concluded to an idea that not only God is over, because you had also this interview by the partner of Sartre, sorry, Simone de Beauvoir, where she was somehow telling that God is really, while humanism is somehow important, God is over. And so that humanism could not accept God, but there was a kind of religious side of the human that was important. And Foucault already immediately then responded that human is an invention. Human is already over, he wrote in 63, and human is something like also vanishing. So paradoxically, the development of the human science is now leading to a disappearance of man rather to an apotheosis of man. So it was something, the end of the human, let's say, that was proposed by Foucault, made me a bit skeptical about how we could think about this figure of the human, let's say, the Western human. And I always had, and I did some shows recently related to 3 fragments that were important for me in order to understand this human figure. The one is the first cinema of the world, the Platonic cave. So I hope you know it. If you don't, I think you have to have a look because it's complicated. But you see some people trying to represent it. So it's a shadow theater somehow that happens where people think that what they see is reality, but finally what they see is shadows. And this world of shadows and reflections is not, yes, in order to understand that it is shadows and reflection, one has to go out of the cave because these prisoners were born there. They thought that all the life they know is only this cinema. And one of them goes out. So this guy who is, let's say, obliged by Platon to, or by Socrates, to go out of the cave in order to understand that there is reality, there is real life, is somehow the hero that becomes maybe a person. And I was very interested in this kind of theoretical installation, which is an architecture practically. I think if you read it, it's a theatrical but architectural setting. Second fragment that was very important for me and became important when I found it some years ago, I think before my show in Orléans, which was this Avicenna, who is an Arab philosopher, who he dreamt about this very idiosyncratic condition. He wanted to prove that soul exists. And he said, okay, I can prove it to you with one simple experiment, thought experiment, he called it. He said, okay, let's imagine that some man is flying over the earth without viewing anything, with the eyes closed, and in an air that has the same temperature like the air of like the human 36 degrees, I don't know. So his hands or legs don't touch each other, so he doesn't have any senses. So he's in this condition, he exists still. So soul exists. That's the experiment. It was the experiment of the flying man. And I think that you immediately can recognize in this kind of experiment the Cartesian output of it, which is maybe in meditations, if you read, well, Descartes, who is a very good writer, even if he's very... yes, he's also speaking a lot about this kind of invalidation of... He's an invalid, but he says, I should consider myself as having no hands, no eyes, no flesh, no blood, no senses. The only change that happens from Avicenna is that now this drives to the big hit of Descartes, which is the cogito, of course. But so it transforms the soul to something that is rational. But in a way, it abstracts this flying condition into something that we could say that concludes the Western human. So my early works were dealing with this idea of trying to really make architectural cuts from the earth. So there is a series of works that I will pass through that were trying to understand the city as a system of this new type of humans that were changing now, going from this Western condition to this other condition. I'm always interested in this kind of cut from a landscape that is totally left indifferent, and that there are these cabins that overfly this. And one of my projects that were discussed, I think, abundantly is this house for doing nothing, done as an answer to a Zizek, the philosopher Zizek fragment. That's how he is sleeping there. And it is a fragment where he was saying that he didn't want anymore to, he says, I don't know if I have the fragment here, I think I don't have it. He was saying that the best thing in kind of situation that he wanted to think about the the condition of today, it's doing nothing. So this is the house of Zizek, the house of doing nothing, where it's somehow as if I had something for Zizek like my client was his fragment. I kept working with beds that were flying. This is from my amphitheater house. I will not stay so much in this, and this is the bath house. Always the upper part is something like flying beds, and I went also forward to it. So when Prato was asked to do something like an installation, I asked to the curator, Fabio Cavallucci was the curator, and I did one of these cabins practically in scale 1:1, and put it in close to a window of this show. That was The End of the World was the show, the name. There is always something semi-theological in this idea of the human, the end of human, Foucault, and humanism, end of humanism. So I did this installation in a church. This is in the first Biennale, where Luca Garofalo and Abdelkader Damani were the curators. And I also started to see that the projection in front of these cabins that were hanging from above, I started also hanging them, was also something important, so that they became some positions of, and there were also some texts completing this series of works. No? Sorry. We will have this problem. Excuse me. Yes, this went. So I was always thinking that this idea of commenting through a text has also a kind of objectual quality. So you can, instead of writing a poem or writing a small essay, maybe sometimes it's more strategic, more interesting to work with this typology of architectural forms that are only there in order to create some more elaboration of thought. So this in Korea, in the Daejeon Museum in 2022, they did also again very big, they gave me a huge space, and I added also a kind of texts. So that there is, maybe I will just go quickly to you so that I show you that there is also something in relation to what is shown in front that is important, start becoming important. So my edurom is not so quick. So there are these cabins that you saw flying. They suppose that people can go there, so I'm always trying to create the maximum of, it will be maybe cleaner in a while. These are something like archipelago of islands. I wanted to make an analogy of these islands to these kind of cabins that stand in the, I don't know why. Yeah. and there is a dialogue having, so it's somehow again a theatrical understanding of what is happening in relation to what is shown, and from where we observe. I will do the same mistake. The Sarkis Biennale of Architecture, I worked with hanging inverted tents, where again there was a system of protocols that were 3 new protocols. I will speak to you about protocols a bit without making you bored, but I decided to collaborate with a friend of mine, theorist of law, creating legislation that would allow, for instance, the Athenian problem to be solved. So we created 5 protocols, and we did the first show in Swiss Architectural Museum with 5 protocols that really were implementing a different status in this kind of situation of Athens. And 3 more protocols I created for this Biennale of Sarkis. I think it was 2021, yeah. This was a parallel show in Madrid. And it's coming back to this sleeping area, if you remember. So this sleeping area was already having this idea of inverted tents put there. You will say why. This was the easiest way to have a clean bed in a dirty thing in the beginning. So because I was imagining that all the people I was telling you that were outside of in the street could enter inside in these blocks where we had already broken all the walls that were from the brick walls. And we would have a ruin, of course. We had to inhabit a ruin. The inhabitation of the ruin would start with these inverted tents. Then we had to clean maybe the lower part and think about it. How would we think about this lower part? So it is always this dialectics of something that's hanging above and something that is lying under it. I was invited in France from some very interesting curators in Dijon, having a space that is called I'm sorry, consortium. Yeah. To think about something that could be built in a forest. So I tried to organize myself about viewing what was in this forest. I did some visits, and I studied a bit what we could find on the trees and under because we had to do something very different here. There was no human intervention. And they bought this land. They wanted really to do something there. I don't know if they will do it, but they asked me and Yunia Ishigami to do 2 projects. So this is Ishigami and mine is there. And together, like this, he did a fantastic project. I like it very much, with very low walls. And I did a different one, of course, that is the installation of a huge elevator bed in the middle of the forest with a corridor that goes through the forest, and it has an intention to become invisible. This study is in a not mature, let's say, level. So it's the long corridor with some facilities, and it drives to this tower where you have an elevator bed that you see maybe not so well visible there. And this bed can have 3 positions. So this is the lower position on the forest level. There is a second position of the bed that drives the bed to this first observatory of the forest. And there is a third position of the bed at the back that you see, and it's the study. So the bed follows the life of, and the corridor is simply so this is the flying bed, let's say. It's the corridor, the elevator bed. I have one more. I'm sorry. Again, Brancy and Archizum associati. I was always very touched by this type of drawings that do make a narrative approach of architecture while being very enigmatic. I don't know how to explain my fascination on this type of work of Brancy. I think that this also, if you remember before, we did a reference to, I think Pier Vittorio is writing this in this last book. He writes that the Stop City is this kind of very radical criticism to the capitalist society through a project. Here, in this type of drawings, Brancy remains more enigmatic. I think that here he also goes toward the fascination to what he's trying to depict here. It's not so visible what criticism is exactly happening here. So let's keep this also in this kind of catalog of scripting and narrative things that one can do with architecture. So being very inspired by it, I also asked, started being more abstract. This is from, I think, Daejeon Biennale of Architecture in, yes, in Hong Kong, not the other, close to Hong Kong, China. The narrative of the flying floor that I showed you before, this I showed you, but this I didn't. So, I'm sorry for the internet doesn't work so well. Okay, I just want to show you that sometimes if one projects, if one does a huge projection in a big wall, the whole room seems like moving. So it was this. So this is also a way to make these cabins that are immobile to really take life with them. And also this transforms the stability of this space and makes them look like vehicles somehow. So it was also another sorry. I started investigating on these pillows. I mean, these pillows, the bottom part of what this field is. So that after doing many tests with this cabin, I'm never very satisfied, but I think that there is something there, I don't know what. And then I started to work with this like abstract living rooms, let's say in the beginning. This is also from Shenzhen Architecture Biennale. And again, the reference goes here, again, the diptych of the upper and the lower side, that I was also interested into making it more clear. I did more drawings with this, with vending machines now. I was thinking that these vending machines could be really thought as elements of architecture. We could do colonnades using vending machines, or creating, because there was something in the abstract concept of Athens being a landscape inside it that is invisible and unusable, not used. Everybody was expecting something. Now we know that they were expecting Airbnb to take over, because all this, I think, was a moment for Athens that it could really grasp an interesting future for it. And I come now to my work with Thanos Artaloudis, the friend of mine I was telling you before, and the 5 first protocols that were shown in the Swiss Architectural Museum. As you see, they are all creating, all this that you see, the names are legislative concepts. So there were ways to understand legislation so that occupation could be legal, let's say, of spaces like this. And there was, in the same time, I was interested in this boring literature of legislation very much. If you see there are the articles, sometimes they are similar. I was fascinated, but in the same time, discussing with Thanos, in the beginning we wanted to change the code, the civic code. We started wanting something really to change the code. Finally, we decided to act via the web, to create agreements via the web, so that people could all agree and move forward towards the direction of creativity of architecture. So after this, I had another part of my work that I cannot show you now, that were exploiting, let's say, every one of these protocols. And these are the Venice ones. Concerning this field, the field of the lower part of this double world, let's say, particularly interesting was the Bürolandschaft concept of 1957 by the Schnell brothers. I thought that this typology of very open plan drives somehow to a system of understanding our normality of life today. I will go a bit quicker. This is my scanning of how the spaces of offices were conceived in the past. If you see, they're very, very specific. They are. You see that you can understand what work is done by the arrangement that they have, and these are the models that brought, in a way, this open plan of the office. And this is, again, Andrea Branzi, together with Ettore Sozzas and Michele De Lucchi, a proposal that they did as a citizen office. And I thought that maybe I would transform it, so I did the change here by transforming the names and organizing something like a living room condition, where, again, now maybe you feel the aura of our beginning of the lecture, where also I was trying to situate historical examples, like this Albini amazing bed that is also at the top. If you see, you have to go up to this, and it's also related to the machine and the hanging thing, or this Absalon amazing work shown in Berlin after his death, where the units are independent and I'm sorry, now I go quickly. I'm not sure that it's going so quickly, and I don't know if we have to, but I wanted just to show you maybe some of these. I don't know if it will perform, so that you have an idea of this. The beginning of it was this, but at this time, now I believe that all this seem a bit given. At this period of time, we were thinking that this could drive not to a, this could drive the office for a day, for instance. It's very banal today, but it was not. At this time, we didn't have WeWork, etc. And we were thinking that maybe in Athens we could do this not for profit, but for having a different social understanding of how scripts, urban scripts can be written, addressed to our life without that somebody earns from it. Then I worked in shows like this, Love and Ethnology, recently. And when, yes, I was planning it, and then in order to work, I needed to put some marks for this field. It's a bit like Dogville. That's how they work there. It's not my idea, but I loved it very much. And then my drawings about these kind of shows were like this. So I had, this is also another thing that I would like to explain to you, but it's difficult. It is that if I'm given a commission to do a show like this, okay, I do it, of course, I do the show, but I have a second thought that, for instance, these are 3 versions of the same show. I think that they are somehow, again, open, empty universities or sleeping areas. And I also design the objects in the same way. So parts of my work have to be seen as concluding, and all of them creating this open environment for this kind of empty university where, so this, for instance, the structure of revenge built in Athens, I would put it in Oblomov box done in Matera for the capital of Europe. This is the same Oblomov box. I mean it to be included in this kind of field. Panels that can have different boards with changing photographs, permanently changing exhibitions, captions, different. This work by Armin Linke, done for Armin Linke, but also replaceable with something different. Glued paperwork. The audio salon in Documenta 14 for people who could sleep during their passage through the exhibition. But also, if you see these pages there everywhere, these are poems by Dmitry Prigov, an interesting and idiosyncratic poet that was writing every day one poem about the revolution. And this is a sleeping area, a sleeping condition, while growing pages about, with poems of Prigov about the revolution is done. More. This is done in. I took all my vitrines that I did in Documenta 14, and did a show with only empty vitrines, Lichtungen. Again, with Armin Linke working in Matadero, Madrid, or creating something like reading spaces or vertical projections to the wall, listen and read objects, empty objects that could accept different typologies of things. So all these are families of objects that go towards the direction of a narrative setting that can be seen as empty. It can be filled with other things in order that it becomes something, but also it comments a bit where we are already. It's again in a kind of dialogue with this. So these curtains, I did them also in Frac Orleans in a specific show for the House for Doing Nothing. I'm interested in this kind of separation that is not absolute, that is somehow, it shows that you are enclosed somewhere, but practically you are in an open. And I have done some of these theater pieces, which are theater pieces of combining these narratives. So either here the words, either they explain what is inside these positions, either sometimes they have a much more specific characteristic. So they really say what is happening. And this creates something like an ensemble, which could be seen as, you have to imagine that in every of these cartons, in every one of these places, there are looping performances happening. This is in a French magazine, Plus, where I showed and explained in detail the. So this is in a Lausanne lecture. I had to do it somewhere in a paper, and I photographed it to show it because it's easy. What I'm trying to describe you instead of having this idea of a teleological drive from A to omega, let's say, from something you do to something that you get, I very often work from an A2 that is not visible from the commissioner. So while the commissioner, I'm working towards omega there, but practically, so it's to explain the strategies of how, yes, I worked there. This is from Venice Biennale. It is an inversion. It deals with a city that becomes a washing machine practically. So it inverts what we normally think that we have in mind, that we always have auxiliary spaces in our houses to hide all these washing and maintenance things. So this is a project about what will happen if there was a total reversion, that we have the center of the city be performed by also robots and actors that create a phantasmagoria of washing, and the maintenance gets in the center of the very heart of the city, where the normal capitalist city had the shops, etc. What happens when this is changed? And I will finish with this. Okay, these are projects from the studio of Berlin. Yes, I wanted to go a bit back to the Greek desert island ambience, let's say. Old projects from 2008. This was the screen wall house, houses that are only screens or reading material houses built from reading materials with reference to Super Studio, of course. I will finish with this project. I will try to be very brief, but it is a project in Sifnos. It's a competition that I took place in. Was amazed by the space, and I was not so eager to follow the rules of the competition, who wanted 6 villas built here. So it's Sifnos is a small village, Pharos, at the bottom circle, and the upper circle is where the plot is. So they were asking us to have, it was a competition with Ares Mateus, the Bow Wow group. It was an important set of architects. So they did finally. They did win the villas, but I decided not to respond with a villas project and create something like in this abstract acropolis that was here, and was something like a stone wall thing. I thought that it would be better to make again some statement or something to think about something more important. And in the past, I have worked at this project from 2006 with long parallel walls, creating an open-air housing. I thought that maybe it was time to come back to this and combine it also with this strategy of the crane rooms that you have already seen. So I did my first drawings about this part of the earth that was given to us, having in mind, of course, all this, again, abstract realization of what we would call the society of today, the human of today coming out of it, etc. And I tried to organize these walls in a way that they expect something like action, theatrical action of living there. And the result was something like this. If you went closer to parts, you would see that there are beds, but also working tables and pools in a kind of meeting each other, while I didn't want to harm the landscape much. So I wanted that it stays at a kind of humble level of the intervention would be very good if it is invisible. Of course, with these things that come up and down, and it's an exception. And this is maybe the main work was done through diagrams, trying to understand how we cannot, because it's also about this, maybe it's important to say that architecture is in this moment of building in nature being also an issue, how you do it today, how do you think about today? So I tried to think about some yards that will be the concept of the house. So it's the concept of this hotel is a hotel of protocols, it's called, and it's based on some yards. These yards are settings where one could for instance, the pool yard. You say the pool yard, okay, let's have the pool. If you go to the pool, you will see that the pool is not something that is only a pool in a hotel, just in a yard, and that's it. It belongs to a system that has to desalinate water, to pump water with solar panels, to drive the water, or maybe the water semi-desalinated is in the pool, then it goes to irrigation systems. So the pool is only a node of a system that somehow tries to take all over the landscape around and also care a bit about it. And the restaurant, it's something that happens to function from the village. You have people from the village, cooking and then moving up to the hotel and serving, and so it's a kind of. And I wanted to reinvent this type of, again, script that will be explicatory enough and understandable in a kind of new typology of drawing that I'm not finished with it. So this was a section of the things that I gave. These are some images of this strange environment. Maybe this is the last thing that I show you. So there is a nice text if you want to further read about how transformations of the hotel or of common sleep, because this hotel has a yard of common sleep. It has a yard, I didn't tell you all of them. There is a maintenance yard where there are actors who play with, they have to play playwrights with doing what is, so I try really to make performative all that is auxiliary in order to, and the museum yard with a collection of objects. I'm very skeptical about tourism and the way that we understand it, and it's also a part of how I think that the everyday life of the city is banalized through the idea of what tourism is, yes, how tourism is operating now. I think that we have an everyday that is touristic in a sense, and we could discuss this, but it's a big discussion. I think that this work that is not finished, and I'm working on it still, in order to create a book about it, and is also related to an understanding of the theatricality of so the scripts and the way that the actors, the people who are living in these hotels are actors. They are not only inhabitants of the hotel, and they have also a certain relation to a kind of monastic idea of setting. So I have a lot of references of things like this, and when they go there, they are already somehow, they go knowing that they will somehow be committed to the protocols that they are there. But you can say that it's a novel also, that it doesn't exist, it will never exist. Huh? But I think that it makes sense to really think seriously about it. I remember a text by Krakauer, an interesting text speaking about the lobby of the hotel as replacing the church. He says that in a church everybody was going in order to pray to God, etc. But in the lobby of a hotel, you have the strange feeling. Of course, we have to think what was the lobby when Krakauer was writing, and I invite you to do so. It's not so easy. There were the lobbies of the American hotel that were trying to imitate a city center in a way, and there are also lobbies of the European cities that are really different places for meeting, much more simple. But he says that this is a big change, that you have a gathering point where there is nothing to be honored. And I think that what I'm trying to think also about in this hotel is where all this idea of saving nature by ourselves or etc., how it can go, of organizing a ruin strategy, of thinking about a new life in this condition, but it's ruined. So Ballard is also somewhere. In this hotel, the visitors are driven to a certain unconsciousness. That's how I wanted to. So they are having a good time, but they are not so conscious about what they do. And I was always thinking that it was good to imitate this gamification concept, if you know, that that you play a game, but while you play a game, you do something that you don't know that you're doing. And also there are, normally in the financial world, you are driven to do something for a company to make money. But in this hotel, I wanted it to become something that is visible and that everybody agrees that it's a good thing to do. And so unconsciousness is a bit questionable in this sense. And I don't know how conscious or not I am in this whole exercise that I do, but thank you for inviting me. And that's it, that's my lecture. Thank you.
Oui, ça marche. Merci. Merci beaucoup, Aristide. Moi, je dois dire que j'ai beaucoup d'admiration pour ton travail parce que tu nous as montré différents projets, tu nous as montré différentes images et chaque projet et chaque image, on peut le voir comme une sorte de cristallisation d'une pensée. Qui tu as développé ou est en train de développer en ce cas sur certaines thématiques. Et en plus, la chose que je trouve assez fascinante et probablement liée aussi à toute la dimension radicale que tu as citée, c'est que dans tous tes projets et dans toutes tes expérimentations, en fait, tu poses des questions. C'est-à-dire, tu ne donnes pas une solution. Ton but, j'ai l'impression, en regardant tes choses, c'est de questionner ce qui se passe au niveau social, environnemental dans la contemporanéité et proposer des questions et pas proposer une solution définitive sur une chose. Et ça, je le trouve très intéressant et très lié à la dimension radicale que tu as citée. Et j'avais une question, et après je laisse la parole, juste une curiosité, parce que tu nous as montré rapidement l'installation et les protocoles que tu as montré, que tu as fait pour Venise, pour la Biennale de 2021. Et en fait, j'ai vu, et je n'avais pas fait attention à ça, que tu as utilisé pour un protocole les mots radicaux. Il y avait les mots radicaux écrits dans des protocoles. Et je voulais savoir quel est le significat pour toi. Et s'il y a un significat spécifique.
C'est une question très difficile, ça.
Très difficile. Alors
Non, il faut la poser. Mais je ne sais pas. Oui, c'est difficile d'expliquer ce qui est radical. Tu te souviens qu'est-ce qu'il...
tu as montré un panneau parmi les différents protocoles.
Oui, peut-être c'est un peu ironique. Oui, parce que c'est un... je me souviens pas... je crois que c'était radical... c'est une... oui, non, c'est pas ironique. C'est un mot où je voulais dire que la position de la propriété pourrait être radicalement contestée, si je me souviens. C'était pas ironique, je me souviens bien. Et c'était en discussion avec Thanos. Oui, alors, oui, on peut parler de ça un peu plus, mais c'est une intéressante question. Merci.
Non, merci à toi. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Oui, je dis.
Bon, merci beaucoup. Alors moi, je peux parler en français? Oui. Je ne connaissais pas très bien votre travail, j'en avais vu un petit peu. Donc, alors, vous me dites si j'ai bien compris. En gros, ce que vous dites, c'est que, si je reprends la conférence depuis le début, c'est qu'on est toujours dans la caverne de Platon, qu'on est dans un cinéma permanent et que, finalement, on est dans des cellules d'isolement qui nous montrent un paysage qui est un paysage de composition, de théâtre, et dans lequel toutes les actions qu'on peut avoir, même le rapport avec la nature, sont des actions illusoires. Est-ce que c'est ça l'idée principale ou pas du tout?
Pas du tout, je ne dirais pas. Non, pas du tout, je ne dirais pas. Mais je dirais que ce n'est pas seulement ça. J'essaye de mettre ça en évidence en même temps qu'il y a une transformation de cette figure humaine qui se passe, qui est en train de se passer, et que je ne connais pas exactement où ça va guider. Alors, je ne sais pas si j'exagère un peu pour qu'on voit où est-ce que ça pourrait mener quelquefois, pour être un peu désespéré plus et peut-être penser. Mais en même temps, j'aime aller à la direction où tout le monde voudrait aller, où tout le monde aimerait aller. Alors, il y a une sorte de poison que je ne contrôle pas très bien, disons. Mais je suis sûr que il y a un changement de la figure humaine. Alors, j'ai fait des travaux sur le lit que je n'ai pas pu montrer, par exemple, parce que je crois qu'il y a... j'ai fait un texte sur la bataille entre le lit et la table, où le lit a gagné dans le modernisme. Alors, il y a une mythologie du lit dont je me suis occupé, et on connaît un peu les travaux. Je crois que cette personne humaine est connectée à cette mythologie du lit. Un peu, qui est un lit interconnecté, un lit dans les réseaux, disons, un lit qui n'est pas indépendant, qui peut recevoir pour manger, qui peut recevoir des objets qu'il veut, les choses, les habits. Alors, ça a une conséquence dans l'espace qui est très, très dramatique. Mais dans cet hôtel, je voulais un peu voir ce qui pourrait se passer si les humains voulaient se réveiller un peu. Je ne sais pas si je réponds. Oui. Merci pour la remarque.
D'autres questions? Sinon, moi, j'en ai une autre, des curiosités. Je vais. Après, si les étudiants et les étudiantes ont des questions, c'est bien. Non, une autre chose, du fait qu'on parlait des transformations, justement, du fait que tu as fait beaucoup de projets sur la dimension d'Athènes. Je pense aussi à la table que tu as, lorsque tu t'es occupé de la table, tu as construit la table dans un système qui contient un protocole urbain et qui devient une table commune. Et donc, tu as un peu transformé une situation, en fait, un lieu urbain. Et tu t'es occupé aussi de la transformation de l'idée même de la polycatichia. Parce qu'en fait, derrière les protocoles, il y a aussi ça, non? Qu'est-ce que c'est la polycatichia dans certains contextes aussi abandonnés? Et qu'est-ce que c'est un contexte urbain qui est par contre, est très actif, avec des gens qui sont très présents. Donc, il y a cette opposition que tu as étudiée lorsque tu as fait aussi les protocoles. Donc, je voulais te demander si tu pouvais nous dire quelque chose en plus, justement, sur ces actes de transformation communs que tu as fait à travers certains éléments, comme par exemple la table, et sur l'interprétation de la polycatichia et de la ville en même temps, qui deviennent ensuite protocole.
Oui, je n'ai pas parlé sur ce projet il est appelé en anglais Open Air Office, comment on dit ça, bureau ciel ouvert, ouais, quelque chose comme ça. C'est un projet où je voulais parler de cette situation de la table aujourd'hui qui est aussi... il y a deux types de tables dans mon univers. La table où on s'assoit l'un en face de l'autre, qui est celle qui se perd le plus. Il y a une autre table qui est la table du desk, où quelqu'un s'assoit devant son ordinateur ou devant le mur, mais il n'y a pas d'autres personnes devant. Alors, c'était un espace abandonné à Athènes, ouvert, et j'ai essayé de penser qu'est-ce qui se passerait. Et en ce moment, il n'y avait pas encore tellement de cafés, Internet, etc. Maintenant, c'est banalisé un peu. Mais ce que j'ai pensé à ce moment, c'était que peut-être on pourrait mettre tous les desks, toutes les choses qui sont disposées, les disposer d'une façon afin qu'on se mette un peu l'un envers l'autre. Mais même si on voit des écrans différents, chose qui se passe maintenant aussi. Et aussi pour faire inspirer un peu plus l'idée qu'on peut discuter sur quelque chose qu'on voit en commun. Alors, il y a cette idée d'une socialisation de cette solitude, disons, mais de la même façon, je réponds de la même manière à votre question. Oui, c'est le maximum qu'on peut faire. Peut-être c'est ça qu'il faut essayer de augmenter. Alors, j'ai fait aussi, j'ai exagéré encore plus, j'ai fait des grandes places d'Athènes. Je les ai dessinées, mais avec des ruines et des tables. Parce que Athènes, c'est facile de trouver les ruines. Tu les trouves dans 50 cm, si tu veux. Alors, j'ai fait un endroit, j'ai fait des excavations stratégiques, disons, pour faire de nouveaux endroits mixtes de cette idée. Entre ruines de la table, ruines de l'Antiquité et ruines de la communauté. Une installation.
La communauté passe par les écrans et par les réseaux. L'idée, c'est qu'il y a la communauté directe.
Oui, sur ce que vous demandez, c'est le chapitre de Zizek qui fait ça, où je dis que withdrawal, comment on dit withdrawal, le retrait fait la communauté aujourd'hui. Oui, oui, oui.
C'est la même chose pour parce que je comprends mieux l'opposition. Je trouve l'opposition entre le lit et la table que vous venez de décrire explique beaucoup votre travail, je trouve, rétrospectivement. Mais au départ, le lit, c'était le lieu collectif, le début, ce que vous avez raconté, et sa maison aussi, cette hypothèse qui est une hypothèse un peu iconoclaste, que le lit, c'est justement le lieu qui aurait remplacé la table, c'est-à-dire qui permet la communauté. Or, ce que vous nous avez montré, c'est quand même des lits qui, même si elles ne sont pas isolées, soit sont en l'air, là, sur ces treuils, ou bien suspendus, ou bien quand même cloisonnés dans les expositions. Donc, ça raconte autre chose quand même. Le lit, il n'est jamais complètement isolé, mais c'est quand même une recherche d'une forme d'isolement, non?
Oui, exactement. Je suis fasciné par cette naïveté de Melnikov, mais aussi, moi, j'essaye d'être un peu naïf. Hein. Alors, je crois qu'il veut faire quelque chose de bien à la société, leur donner le meilleur sommeil possible en tout aspect. Non? Et ce que je découvre, moi, avec les lits, c'est le contraire. C'est qu'il y a... peut-être personne ne dort à ces lits, vraiment. C'est insomnie totale dans ce lit de Zizek.
Un degré d'intimité qu'on peut reconnaître dans les lits que tu nous as montrés, parce qu'ils ont une place spécifique, etc. Donc, ils contiennent un degré d'intimité, mais en même temps, ils décrètent l'élimination de la pièce, justement. La pièce, en quelque manière, va disparaître et il devient eux-mêmes, en quelque manière, des éléments capables de générer des situations et capable de devenir une sorte de cristallisation d'un espace collectif, si on veut. Parce qu'il est intime, mais en même temps, il est dans la collectivité. Il n'est pas enfermé à travers une frontière qu'on peut imaginer être un mur qui enferme, en quelque manière.
Oui, mais c'est une collectivité mentale, quand même.
Oui, oui.
C'est pas une collectivité physique. C'est quand même des cellules qui communiquent par des réseaux et par des pensées.
Ouais.
C'est pas du partage.
Oui.
Il y a une façon de partage à travers les réseaux, oui. D'autres questions?
Non, ils sont très, très... Vous êtes... Oui, vous êtes un peu tired. Hein? Est-ce qu'il y a une question?
Oui. Vous avez une question? Non.
Oui? No? Bon. I switched to English. I'm sorry. Thank you for your lecture. And I was just wondering if you could spend some more words about architecture as a text, as a set of linguistic system, and if there is in your work a grammar of architecture, which maybe could be linked to the theme of consciousness and unconsciousness, for what regards in particular the generative grammar of Noam Chomsky, or all these theories developed through the 50s and 60s, so at the same time as Andrea Branzi and Archizum projects. And that's all.
Est-ce que je réponds en français? Tu comprends un peu? Ouais. Parce que je crois qu'ils vont dormir si je commence anglais. Je crois que, oui, pour moi, quand j'étais à l'université, je pensais déjà à l'architecture un peu en termes de mots. C'est-à-dire que la table est un endroit où des gens peuvent se réunir, et qu'il y a c'est 75 centimètres de la... Alors, on pourrait faire causus, peut-être. Hein? On pourrait faire une description conceptuelle des objets au lieu de faire des dessins. Si on commence par ça, on peut dire qu'on peut faire des projets aussi comme ça. C'est-à-dire que organiser des projets qui soit vont vers une partie cachée de la table ou transforment la table dans une direction imprévue. C'est-à-dire, qu'est-ce que je veux dire avec ça? Que je n'étais pas... j'étais toujours un peu influencé par la littérature que tu te réfères, mais il y avait quelque chose de plus immédiat. Et quand je dis que je suis intéressé à la linguistique des choses, peut-être je ne parle pas à un degré tellement sophistiqué que ta question me veut. Mais il y a des choses de... J'étais un étudiant de Jacques Derrida ici, à Paris. Alors, c'était pour moi une révélation de connaître toute l'histoire de la linguistique, les écoles de Prague, le post-structuralisme que les Américains appellent comme ça. C'était très... Ça m'a renouvelé un peu la façon de voir cette immédiateté. Mais je ne me reconnais pas dans cette sophistication, est-ce qu'on peut dire ça? Quand je fais les projets. C'est parce que je crois que l'architecture, c'est aussi une question qui peut-être peut se faire pour l'art. On ne peut pas être tellement... on ne peut pas connaître la réponse de la personne qui voit ce qu'on a produit. Et cela est très différent en relation d'un texte écrit, un texte qui est un essai, par exemple. Hein. La précision de l'essai, d'un essai est formidable. On ne peut pas faire ça avec l'art ou l'architecture, je crois. C'est quelque chose il y a une différence. Je me suis très intéressé par le texte dans l'architecture. Je crois que l'aspect narratif est beaucoup plus fort que l'aspect explicatif, disons. Oui. Une première. Ça ne fait rien, vous êtes fatigué, je dois comment dire, apologize. I apologize for killing you. Ah, très bien.
Ok. Alors, ok. Je ne sais pas si j'ai bien compris. Mais on parlait avec les différentes questions des relations qui tendraient à devenir plus connectées que physiques, avec les lits suspendus, Mais du coup, est-ce que c'est plus une vision peut-être dystopique? C'est-à-dire que les relations sont amenées à s'arrêter, les relations physiques sont amenées à s'arrêter, enfin voilà, c'est juste, je sais pas si j'ai bien compris, mais du coup je le voyais un peu peut-être de manière négative si ces lits sont suspendus et qu'on est connecté plus de manière avec les ordinateurs. Est-ce que ça tend vers une critique de notre société?
Merci. Oui, il n'y a pas de réponse définitive. C'est ce que j'ai essayé de dire. C'est qu'il y a, pour moi, j'appartiens à une génération plus âgée que la vôtre, c'était le changement de la physicalité des corps, de relations, était un peu choquant. Pour vous, c'est plus normal. Et aussi, vous faites une autre distinction entre cette normalisation qui nous paraît un peu choquante parce qu'on connaît l'état d'avant. Alors, je crois que oui, d'une manière, je suis guidé vers cet aspect dystopique plusieurs fois, mais aussi j'ai l'impression que c'est une chose qui va changer. Alors, c'est ce changement que j'essaye de décrire, en n'étant pas sûr que je peux le captiver, comment dire. Oui. Mais c'est exactement ça, oui.